Maybe she'll show.
All right, so just a quick announcement. No class next week because we assume that I have a lot of cooking to do. I got to make the fish head and a lot of other things.
Well, the males in your family do cook.
Yes, they do. And then we'll have a class 2 weeks from today, which will be during Aseret Simei Tshuva. Hopefully we'll be able to find something meaningful for us to enter into Yom Kippur with. We left off talking about Yom Kippur last week in the Kuzari on page 273. And essentially we were talking about the Chassid. A Chassid is someone who looks forward to those periodic observances in life. He looks forward to the daily observances, the weekly observances, the monthly observances, the Yom Tov observances, and the apex of his year is Yom Kippur. Because this is the time when, like we said, he gets to cleanse himself, purge himself, and totally remove himself from any kind of physical existence to the best that a human being has the ability to do. And this is really a sense of real deep cleansing that he feels that he's able to go through. And that's why Yom Kippur is such an exciting thing that he looks forward to in his life. And so after he's described all of this, we're now at the bottom paragraph, subparagraph 16. This is the way the saintly person behaves anytime he chooses to establish a fast day for himself. And what he's saying is that there are times in life when a pious person may choose to electively fast if he feels that I'm going through a situation in life where I feel I need reinforcement, I feel I need to abstain because I'm going through a tough time. It's almost like many times we feel like we've overdone it and we need to go on a diet or we need to abstain from something that we feel is unhealthy. We've become, addicted to some kind of vice, and so we pull back and we say, okay, I'm abstaining from this activity. There are a lot of things that in life that we overdo. We can overdo our viewing of the internet, and so some people would say, okay, so I'm going to go cold turkey and I'm going to voluntarily abstain from going online for a week or a month or however long I feel that period needs to be. Person overindulges in eating, so they can say, I'm going on a diet and I'm going to only eat certain kinds of foods. The pious person is very much in touch with his neshama, and if he feels that he needs to sort of pull back and say, you know what, I've overdone it in a certain area, I'm going to fast. In Europe, they used to fast every Monday and Thursday, a lot of very pious people. This was a regular occurrence in the old Shtetl in Europe. A lot of it had to do with economics. People couldn't afford to feed their families. So the men of the household would fast every Monday and Thursday, but it was considered an act of piety. and so this is not so far-fetched. But he says he afflicts his sight, his hearing, and his speech because he wants to really remove himself from the physical world and only engages those faculties in ways that bring him closer to Hashem. All of his internal faculties, and by that we mean his imagination, his desires, his thoughts, etc., are channeled toward this objective. And he accompanies all this with good deeds. And that's very important for Yehuda Halevi to qualify, is that as much as you would like to sort of dedicate yourself to spirituality, you can't go up into a monastery on top of a mountain and completely separate yourself from the observances that are part of Halakhah. So as much as you'd like to go away to a retreat, you have to always maintain halachic observance as part of that regimen of abstinence. I was just speaking with my wife the other day. This is going back about 25 years. we knew this very, very, very special lady, Jewish woman, who decided she had gone through her whole, she was well into her when we met her, she was in her 70s. And about a few years before, when she was in her late 60s, her husband had already passed away. She had this epiphany that she had to start a new chapter in her life. This was her, they talk about chapter 2s. This was her chapter 2 in life. She had gone through, raised her family, raised her kids, helped her husband in business. Children were quite successful, and she decided there was something missing in her life. So she opened up a health institute. It was a retreat that still there in San Diego, California, where people would go to detoxify, to detox. And she created this whole system based on wheatgrass juice and colonics and just eating vegan before I think even vegan was a thing. And people would go there, people who were quite ill, many of them would have a recovery.
My brother-in-law went a year ago.
Oh yeah?
Still exists.
Yeah.
He believes in it.
Yeah. So this health institute was started by this Jewish lady. She was not from. I happened to meet her because, of course, she had this very, very spiritual connection, and she met us and started to get involved in Yiddishkeit, and actually through the study of Derech Hashem from the Ramchal, a very, very powerful sefer. If I had translated Derech Hashem, we would be doing that today. And so she became religious, and we would quite often speak about some of the conflicts that she was experiencing between religious observance and this health institute, which there were actually from people who went to the health institute, and they were able a great rabbi, his wife went to this health institute quite often, like a chief rabbi of a city, which I won't name, but they were there quite often, and we would go visit them, and so it wasn't difficult. You could maneuver both worlds, but sometimes you had to make sure that in the course of doing all of these detoxifications, you were still exercising Judaism, you were still observing mitzvahs, putting on your tefillin, davening, and all of these other things at the same time. It's very ironic. What happened is that she became so frum, she got very involved in Hasidus. She went to Israel quite regularly, and she was having a great time. She was actually this was like her chapter 3. Chapter 2 was this health, and now she was in chapter 3. She became this very, very passionate religious person. But unfortunately, she went back to eating Jewish food. So she sort of dropped the health part when she went to Israel, and she was eating cholent and kishka. Unfortunately, she didn't live as long as she thought she was going to. But that's unfortunate. She was a very, very special person. A lot of times people think that they have to choose between the extra things that we do in order to express our devotion to Hashem, and then the standard things that we do as Jews as part of the Jewish community. A lot of us fail to realize that it's not an either-or. A person can feel that there is so much that one can gain from meditation, from going to retreats where we sort of come back in touch with ourselves. That could be totally secular. There are some Jewish-themed retreats that you can go to. The problem is, of course, you may meet someone that you know. And sometimes on these retreats, you want to be a total stranger. You don't want to meet anyone. You don't want to bump into anyone because you have to sort of bare your soul and talk about your life. And so you don't want to. But there's not a contradiction between the two, but you just have to be able to maneuver it. So this pious person understands that the halachic system is the starting point, but is not the end point. So this pious person tries to create events and moments of meditation and self-reflection that allow them, and fasting, and detoxifying that allow them to purge themselves of whatever they feel that they may have accumulated. And because they understand that halachic observance is the starting point, not the end point. Just because you can have cholent in kishka doesn't mean you should have cholent in kishka, right? And so, it's important to remember that. There are a lot of things that are kosher that we really, if we really were really in touch with the rhythms of our soul, we would probably want to abstain from. The reason why we have hot food on Shabbos is not because there's a mitzvah of cholent and kishka. The reason is because we want to show that we're not Karaites. You can fulfill that mitzvah by drinking a glass of tea. You don't have to have a plate of saturated fat in order to fulfill that mitzvah. Linda.
Isn't it true, though, that part of Judaism really emphasizes taking care of your body from a health perspective and eating healthy? Like, I remember years ago, I took many years ago a Mishnah class with, I won't say who, but also a very well-known rabbi. He's not alive now. And I was trying to convince him that, I don't remember what we were studying, that smoking, he smoked. And we were trying to convince him that this was one of the things that really was against,
the Torah.
It really is against, I don't know if you say halakhah, but Torah values.
Yeah, I think most people acknowledge that it's against halakhah today. Yeah.
But other things also, like all this stuff, to me, I would think that woman actually was very in sync with Judaism, the essence of Judaism, really. I mean, I don't know about the colonics and all that stuff, but the health perspective of it really isn't that really like very kind of what? I
mean, it is. Obviously it's a question of emphasis and balance, creating the balance in life between the halachic system that Hashem tells us that this is sort of like the minimum that you need to live by, but then also augmenting that with things that we realize today are healthy for us, healthy spiritually, healthy physically. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, it can be beneficial to go to some of these health institutes, to these retreats. It depends, of course, how they're run and who's running them, and you have to sometimes sift through some of the messages. Some of the messages may be okay, maybe not okay. Probably a good idea to speak to someone who is, a figure of authority in your life to find out whether this is whether this is contradictory or not. But once you have the clearance, I think these are good things. And I think that's what the piety of this person is that he realizes that halakha is the starting point, it's not the end point. And like we've spoken about before, prayer from the Siddur is the starting point, it's not the end point. There are so many parts of Yiddishkeit, that we consider to be our daily living in Judaism. Sometimes we make the mistake that it's the end point, but it's really only the starting point. And that's why so many of us recognize that chesed is something that we have to continue doing, even though the daily routines of our halachic life do not require us to engage in a certain aspect of maybe bikur cholim or tzedakah or things like that. But we always want to augment more and more and more to the best of our abilities. So fasting is one augmentation. Chesed is another augmentation. Taking care of our bodies is an augmentation. Right? Regular exercise. It used to be back a century ago, you were considered to be not a serious ben Torah if you took time to play ball. Playing ball was not for a yeshiva bacher. But today, the yeshivas recognize that if they don't allow the boys to exercise, they're actually doing them a health disservice, because one of the biggest problems in the religious world today is, like in many communities, is obesity and sedentary living. Pediatric diabetes is a serious problem. This is why, I'm very conflicted every time we give kids candy in shul. The candy man used to be one guy in the shul that you used to go to. You got a sucking candy. That's what I remember. Maybe if you were lucky, there were two candy men in the shul. You got two sucking candies. Today, you see the kids, they come with a plastic bag. They come with the shopping bag. to be able to collect all the candies, and they go home with this. And the problem is of course, so this is really contributing to a degradation of the health of our children. I don't want my kids coming back with a shopping bag full of candy. That's not what we're supposed to augment their health, make them healthier. So give them carrot sticks. People say, why are you giving them, the candy when you give them carrot sticks? Well, the answer is, I want them to come to shul next Shabbos. They're not going to come if we give them carrot sticks. But it's got to be a balance somewhere. I'm not sure what it is. Okay, so the Kuzari says, we turn the page, and we're in paragraph number 6. The Kuzari asks, do you refer, when you say good deeds that have to accompany any act of piety, do you refer to those good deeds that are well known to everyone? And what he's really asking is, what is a good deed for a person who's secular? Is a good deed, kindness, charity, feeding the homeless, visiting the sick? Is that what you're referring to? So the rabbi says the civil and rational laws are well known, but the divine laws that were additionally given to the nation of God and which require God to directly govern them cannot be derived intuitively. It was therefore necessary for God to specify their general and specific rules. So you can't just say, well, I'm just going to be a good person and I'll do good deeds. Because good deeds can be interpreted just, rational law. Visit the sick, feed the homeless, take care of the needy, etc. He says that's only half the picture. There's the divine laws. What we mean divine laws are the chukim, the laws that are God-given that cannot be derived intuitively because God prescribes certain activities that are completely metaphysical in nature, that don't have any connection with rationality, and we wouldn't therefore be able to intuit them left to our own devices, like the kashrus laws, like shatnez, like different kinds of observance. It was therefore necessary for Hashem to specify their general and specific rules. Furthermore, even the civil and rational laws are not entirely known intuitively. Because even if we understand that we are to uphold a certain law, we don't always know in what measure. So he says, I'll give you an example. He says, for example, we know intuitively that we're obligated to be humble and to restrain the soul to make it servile and lowly. We know that oppressing our fellow man, engaging in wanton behavior with women, and incest are all despicable. We know that we're obligated to honor our parents and so on. However, defining the parameters and measurements of each rule so that it is beneficial for all can only be done by the blessed God. So, even there's a halachic system even for what we call the mishpatim, things that are rational, things that we would intuit on our own. Here, there's a very important commentary from the Abar Benel. Just take a moment to take a look at it. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but I just want you to take a look at it for just a moment. The Abar Benel's commentary at the very beginning of Parshas Mishpatim makes a very interesting comment because he notices that when you look at the first pasuk of Mishpatim, what does the word Mishpatim mean? Ve'ela ha-mishpatim, these are the Mishpatim. It refers to laws that are mostly civil and rationally derived. When you acquire a servant, you have to treat the servant compassionately. There are certain labor laws about how to treat employees. That's a lot of what Parshas Mishpatim is about mitzvos that are what we call ben adam l'chaveiro, between man and his fellow man. And that's why Chazal say that mishpatim are things that we would derive intuitively, even if the Torah had not given them to us. The Abar Benel says that there are 3 types of mitzvahs. There are chukim, edot, and mishpatim. He says chukim and edot, I can really understand why the Torah has to write them. Chukim are those laws that the Kuzari said really could not be intuited, because they don't really have any rational explanation, because they're purely metaphysical in their benefit. Edot are those observances that we do to commemorate historical events, like Shabbos commemorates creation, Pesach, and that really the Shalosh Regalim commemorate Yitzias Mitzrayim. So those are Edot. But Mishpatim, the third category, what's the reason why the Torah has to write them? Every society has mishpatim. And that question is only accentuated by things that our sages tell us. First of all, he says, look at one of the Psalms of King David. And this is, I have underlined. He says, V'yikshe im kein ma'amar ha'mishorer. He says, how do we understand the psalmist's words? Magid divarav li'Yaakov, chukav u'mishpatav li'Yisrael. That God informs his words to Jacob, the Jewish people. His chukim and mishpatim he teaches to Israel. Lo asa chen l'chol goy, u'mishpatim bal yida'um. But God does not do this to any other nation. And when it comes to the mishpatim, he does not even inform the other nations about his mishpatim. That doesn't make any sense. What does that mean, God does not inform the other nations of his mishpatim? Mishpatim are things like don't murder, don't steal, treat people fairly, be kind to others. So what does that mean that God does not inform the rest of the world? Don't we all have an instinct to know these things? So how can you tell me that God only teaches the Jews and he doesn't inform the other nations? And the next underlined section also is difficult because our sages sort of underscore that point by saying, V'amru Chazal, lifneihem v'lo lifnei ovdei kochavim, lifneihem v'lo lifnei hajotot. That our sages say explicitly that when the Torah says, Ve'ela ha-mishpatim asher tasim lifneihem, these are the mishpatim that you shall place before the Jewish people, before the Jews and not before the non-Jews. Do not give the non-Jews these mishpatim. What does that mean, don't give the non-Jews the mishpatim? Everyone has mishpatim. Every culture, both ancient and modern, have mishpatim. There are laws in Canada, there are laws in the United States. Every civilization, Hammurabi's code was in existence in the times of the Bible. So how do you understand this? God says, don't give my mishpatim to other nations. Yes?
Can I answer that question?
If you like.
So, what does it mean that we are to be a light unto other nations, and that we're often put up to a standard, like we know what the Nazis, we were the conscious, the belief in God is, so that's what we stand for, and that is our purpose.
So therefore, the way you're interpreting this is that God gave the Jews a special task that he didn't give to others, which is to educate the world about ethics and morals. Very good. Very good. So maybe that's what those words mean. God gave us this specific directive. But let me show you what the Abarbanel answers, and then we'll have a discussion. This is this last short paragraph. He says, "Umasher ra'ui sheyomar b'tshuvat zeh." He says, what we can say about this to answer this question is, "Hu shehamishpatim ha'elokiyim yuvdelu mishar hamishpatim shel b'nei Noach v'shel shar ha'umot b'shnei hevdelim atzumim." He says, we can explain that the divine mishpatim are inherently different from other civil laws that are practiced by other nations. There are two inherent differences. Ha'echad mitzad teva ha'mishpatim atzmam. One is the innate nature or the extent of these mishpatim as they're given in the Torah. Sheha'elokiyim kololim divarim achadim ma shelo yimatzu b'mishpatei ha'umot. He says because the Torah's mishpatim include things that are not at all included in the laws of the other nations. Everyone has a universal law of thou shalt not kill. But the Torah's application of thou shalt not kill applies to even the prohibition to embarrass someone, to disparage someone publicly, to humiliate someone. Now, there's no law in Canada that if you humiliate someone publicly, you go to prison. But in Torah law, if you humiliate someone publicly, that's a very serious violation. That's tantamount to murder. So answer number one is the mishpatim that we have are of a different texture from the mishpatim that other nations have. And that's why we need Hashem to prescribe them, because there's an added sensitivity that doesn't exist in secular culture. We all know that you have to, in employer and employee relationships, you have to treat an employee fairly. But in Jewish law, anyone, the Gemara says that if you have an Eved Ivri working for you, you have to provide them with a higher standard of living than you would provide for yourself. So in many ways, like the Gemara says, that if you have only one pillow and you have an Eved that works for you, you have to give the Eved the pillow and you sleep on the straw, because you can't have a higher standard of living than the Eved that works for you. So there are many examples of this added sensitivity that exists in the Torah. So that's difference number one. And he says, "V'hasheni mitzad hagimul v'hasachar hanitan l'shomer hamishpatim ha'elokiyim me'adon hakel yitbarach shemo." He says the second inherent difference is that there is a side benefit to the observance of the mishpatim that are given by Hashem that does not exist in the secular world. A non-Jew who observes the rules of society lives well and lives by the rules of his society. A Jew who lives by the rules of a biblical society lives well, but also receives reward from Hashem for having fulfilled a mitzvah. And this is based on the principle of Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lizakot et Yisrael, lefichach hirba lahem Torah u'mitzvot. God actually gave us mitzvot that He knew He didn't have to give us, but He wanted to increase our reward. He said, "Listen, I know that you're going to intuit certain mitzvahs on your own. There are certain things that I've put in the Torah that don't need to even to be published, because you would know them anyway, like don't murder, don't steal. But I've put extra things in the Torah so that every time you observe it, you're actually fulfilling a mitzvah for which you get reward. מה שאין כן במשפטים ההסכמיים בבני אדם, כי אין בהם זולת תיקון המדינה והקיבוץ ואין בהם שכר, ולא גמול ניתן מהאלוקה יתברך על שמירתם זולת תועלת עצמה. But other secular laws, their observance just provides some kind of standard for society, but there's no divine reward or punishment that accompanies them. So those are the two inherent differences that the Abarbanel sees. Rabbi Yehuda Levi really subscribes to the first answer, which is we know that we're obligated to, honor our parents. But how far does honoring your parents go? Does secular society value that tradition, that you don't sit in your father's chair, that you stand up when your parent comes into the room? Probably not. Secular society, if you look at, in the media today, even sitcoms that go back decades, the value of respect to the father figure in the family has deteriorated significantly. So there's an issue of respect, but respect today is, not the kind of respect that the Torah requires that a child show to a parent. So all of these things are things that we would have come to on our own. But to what degree and to what measure, that's why we need the Torah. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Levi is basically not prepared to give up on halacha. He basically says, listen, piety requires you to transcend halacha. But halacha is quite necessary as well. Halachic observance and the basic bare bones of what the Torah says are things that you need to do no matter what. Okay. Let's, yes?
When I look at the world and look at ISIS and the Nazis and so many terrible things happening, I don't think sometimes I think it's not innate that people do good. You know what I mean? Like there's so many evil things in the world. I think we need the Torah and it's not a given.
Yeah, I think that's also an answer, is that man can rationalize any kind of deplorable behavior. But even the Nazis believed in a moral society. They didn't feel that immorality was okay. They had a code of ethics. They were in Germany was the ASPCA was very big in the Nazi Germany. Kindness, showing compassion to animals. They just felt Jews were sub-animals, so therefore they...
That they would give food to the bears and not to the pigs like that.
Yeah, yes.
I agree with Elaine, but I would take it a step further. I disagree with the premise that people intuit anything. Open the newspaper nowadays, maybe this was true when Father Knows Best was on, as you're referencing. I'm sure it must be hard for fathers nowadays that the kids don't bring the slippers when he comes to the door. But open the newspaper and see what's going on in this world. Teenagers are hazing and killing each other and torturing each other. You don't have to look to Nazis or ISIS. Just look at regular, everyday people who grow up in normal middle-class homes. They're horrible. They have no values. And you say, everybody knows, don't kill each other, don't steal, don't torture each other. No, they don't know it.
I think they do know it, but they just don't care. I mean, I think society at large certainly does know this. There is a law on the books that says murder is a crime.
I would reference what it says in Pirkei Avos, pray for the state, the welfare of the state, because otherwise people will swallow each other whole.
That's individuals. But societies as a whole all have, since time immemorial, have established codes of conduct.
Some people in society see the need for those laws, but if you look at what people are doing nowadays...
Right. So I'm saying governments have always established law because that's what preserves civilization. That's the point, is that we don't need a Bible necessarily because our government would establish, that's the argument. Any government would establish these rules because they're necessary to preserve the peace. And that's why all of these answers are provided, that even though we all live in societies where governments establish rules, but there's the fine-tuning that has to be addressed by the Torah. Yeah.
Well, there's also the aspect of Sheva Mitzvot Noach, and there are good goyim as well. So I don't think that you can say that goyim aren't entitled to Olam Haba if they keep Sheva Mitzvot.
Oh, no one was talking about reward and punishment, of course.
Well, he's saying that only the Jews get rewarded for keeping, like, just society.
The specific societal laws. But a Gentile who's righteous also has a share in the world to come.
But if a guy keeps the Sheva Mitzvot Noach, but just don't steal, then they be entitled to.
Yes, they're entitled to Olam Haba as well.
So it's different when
I don't think the Abarbanel is contradicting that. I think he's basically saying that if you don't speed, you don't get if you don't go past the speed limit, you don't get rewarded in heaven for that. Okay.
We finished this.
Okay.
Wait a second.